Hello friends, in the series which we are doing on issues in world history, the 20th century, today we will talk about the rise of fascism and Nazism. In the earlier lecture on the rise of fascism and Nazism, we talked about the various aspects or the kind of conditions which led to the rise of these two movements, and as we also discussed earlier, how the kind of situation in Italy at that point of time which was conducive for the rise of fascism, where we find that they had a leader called Benito Mussolini, who initially was a socialist, but how he turned against socialism and he was supported by the capitalists and the military factions of that time. And we realized that though Italy was on the side of the victorious nations, but Italy was totally dissatisfied after the Treaty of Versailles, and this kind of dissatisfaction was utilized by Mussolini to his advantage, and we find that he got the support of the capitalist sections of the society, those who were fearful that there might be some kind of a socialist and violent revolution in Italy as well, taking the cue from the Russian Revolution of 1917, and how the socialists in Italy they had also formed a party. And to this we realize that Benito Mussolini also started some kind of a nationalist movement, where we realize that when he was being invited by the king to form the government, and he was able to in a way get that kind of support from these sections and the factions, and he was able to establish his grip over the Italian state. And when we see that how the kind of role which was played by Mussolini at that point of time, when the kind of a situation which was existing in Italy at that point of time, that how from the political point of view they were not satisfied, and from the economic perspective as well, we find that there was a lot of unemployment in Italy, and Italy felt that it should have been treated in a far better manner during the First World War. So this kind of a situation was beneficial to Mussolini, and we find that how he created some kind of a dedicated band of followers to him, black shirts, and how these black shirts, they were committed to Mussolini, and they were ready to go for any kind of violence to subdue their political opponents. And when we see the situation of the fascists, they were in a way semi-military organization in that sense, and how the black shirts, they were able to create some kind of a terror among the people, those who were opposed to them. And their aggressiveness in that sense led to the subsequent decline of other parties, and we find that communists were their special targets. Communists, they were being targeted, and these people, they were able to in a way create their situation in a manner where they were seen to be more stronger in nature. And they also participated in the elections, where we find that they in a way could get 35 seats in the elections of 1921 against 122 of the socialists and communists in the Chamber of Deputies. And we find that how Mussolini held a national fascist congress at Naples on 28 October 1922, and threatened to march on Rome with his men unless the reign of government was entrusted to him. So this kind of a speech which he delivered, he in a way threatened the state at that point of time, and where we find he was able to garner a lot of support for himself, and armed fascist military men began to concentrate on Rome. And we find that in October 1922 the fascists felt strong enough to attempt the overthrow of the government by force. And the government, on the other hand, decided to declare the martial law, and King Victor Emmanuel III refused to sign the declaration. And this government, which was there before the arrival of Mussolini, the liberal government, resigned on 27th October, and on 29th October 1922 the king invited Mussolini to form the government. So in that sense we find that how Mussolini was able to create his own government when he was being invited by the king to form the government, and from 1922 till 1945, till the end of the war, how Italy was being ruled by Mussolini and the fascist government. So he had a very long kind of a reign, or long kind of a rule, where we find that from 22 onwards he was able to establish his grip on the Italian state. And we find, when you talk about the kind of policies which were being followed by Mussolini, then we see that he was in the support of the capitalist factions, and how he was able to secure some kind of a support from them as well. And we see that the kind of declaration which was made by Mussolini when he made a march on Rome, where he said that tomorrow Italy will have not a ministry but a government. And when the parliament entrusted the dictatorial powers to Mussolini, and thus a fascist dictatorship began in Italy at that point of time, and how his coalition government was approved by the Chamber of Deputies by a vote of 306 to 116. So from the political point of view also, we find that the kind of support which was garnered by him. And apart from that, we also see that from the military point of view as well, where we find that the black shirt and the other kind of organizations which were in a way established by the fascist organizations, and how these fascist organizations they were relying on their own strength, their strength of violence and power, and the other sections or other political sections, they were now being deprived of any kind of a strength. They were being subdued by the policies which were followed by Mussolini in that sense. And we also realize that when you see the kind of economic measures which were being followed by Mussolini at that point of time, they were also such that the capitalist sections of the society, they got benefits from it, and they were also designed in such a way that the capitalist sections of the society they get benefit from such kind of measures. And Mussolini, realizing the importance of these sections, those who will be able to provide him with money at that point of time which was required for the governance, as well as he was also fearful of the socialist and the communist factions which were there in the Italian society. And we find that many of these socialist and the communist factions, they were being eliminated through assassinations, and he was able to create this kind of a situation where we find that he was able to establish his rule. And before the arrival of Mussolini, we also find that this kind of a situation led to the establishment of a fascist state. And we find, when you talk of the general populations, how they in a way approved this fascist revolution, and they wanted and expected a firm and a strong government which was being promised to them by Mussolini. And we find that how from 1922 to 1943 largely Mussolini was able to control the situation in his favor till the time from 22 to 1943, till he was in rule. Mussolini was able to have that kind of a grip over the Italian state. And we also see, when you talk about the rule which was in a way exhibited by Mussolini, and this kind of an ideology, or the fascist ideology, was an important component of whatever decisions which were being taken by the Italian state at that point of time. And there are other views as well, the people, those who have argued that how in reality, when we see a small minority of the confirmed fascist, they existed, and the rest of the population submitted by accepting the new regime. So this kind of an idea was also there, that not everyone in a way followed the fascist ideology. Rather, many of them, they were the mute spectators, and they were not actively supporting the fascist state. Rather, they in a way accepted the new regime. And we find that from 1922 to 1943, during this time, apart from creating a band of fascists to support his government, how Mussolini also in a way entered into some kind of an alliance with Hitler, and how both of them, they had this kind of an idea to conquer the world. And when we find that when Italy was defeated in 1943 and his regime was overthrown in 1943, then a new chapter for the Italian state began after the Second World War. And when you talk about that, how this kind of a situation which led to rise of fascism in Italy, and as we have already talked about that the Treaty of Versailles, how it disappointed the Italians, and they were not happy with the way they were being treated and the kind of share which was being given to them, the way the German territory was being divided among the other victorious nations, and Italy was not able to secure that kind of a territories for themselves. And we find that how Italy had joined the Allies after the Secret Treaty of London of 1915, and the Allies had agreed to give Italy certain areas like Eritrea and Trieste, and later backed out. So this was also one of the reasons, in that sense, in the way that how Italy's grievance was against the Allies. And we find that when you talk about the military leaders in Italy, they were also not happy, and because they felt that the country had not benefited in the way they wanted it to be, and the kind of the situation which existed in Italy. And so some kind of a confusion at political, social and economic life existed in Italy in 1919 and thereafter. And when you talk about the economic situation and the kind of structure which it was there at that time, and how it had collapsed due to the war, and we also find that the natural resources, they were also not in plenty. And we find that the people, those who were supporting fascism and in Italy at that time, and they realized that they will be saved by the fascist revolution. So they had this kind of a belief that fascism is going to save them, and if they provide the support to the fascist rule, then Italy will in a way come out of this kind of a situation, and will able to in a way prove themselves in the long run. And when you talk about the various kinds of historians, those who have tried to understand the situation, they have argued that some of them, they have argued that the economic condition of Italy after the war, that is from the period 1919 to 1922, it improved considerably, and they in a way dispute the contention that the post-war conditions alone were responsible for the rise of fascism in Italy. So they have their own arguments. They have argued that from 1919 to 1922, the economic situation of Italy had definitely improved, and that could not be only seen as as the reason for the rise of the fascist tendencies in Italy. And when you see the post-war economic prosperity in Italy, it was seen to be short-lived in nature, and if you see the economic conditions at that time, they were not seen to be satisfactory, and we find that there was a lot of unemployment in Italy at that point of time. And this resulted in a way that how the revolutionary movements, they got strengthened, especially in increasing the influence of the revolutionary movements and also the Communist Party. And we find that there were strikes, lockouts and closures of the industrial establishments during this time. So it was also not in a way conducive for or supportive of the cause of the capitalist sections, those who were fearful of such kind of a prevailing situation, and they felt that unless they will find some kind of an opposition to these kinds of movements, they will not be able to survive and themselves. So, from the economic point of view, that was the situation. From the political point of view, we find that how the government was not able to save the situation, because there was a lot of chaos and corruption at that time, and there was also some kind of a loss of faith in the parliamentary institutions due to the administrative inefficiency and disorder which was existing in Italy at that point of time. And when this kind of a situation was there, we find that how the middle classes got alarmed, and the well-to-do who were haunted by the spectre of Bolshevism. So, this kind of a situation where some kind of an anarchy prevailed, and the middle classes and the upper sections of the society, they felt that it might create a situation of Bolshevism, where the Russian Revolution, which was successful in Russia in 1917, and the socialists could also try to create a socialist and a communist government in Italy. And so, this kind of a success of the Russian Revolution was also made the people from the middle classes and the upper wealthier sections of the society suspicious about the intentions of the communists in Italy. And we find that how the forces of socialism and nationalism, they both of them, they were prominent in Italy at that point of time, and some kind of a conflict between these two forces could be seen. And how the Italian public opinion was also not satisfactory from that point of view. They had a lot of disgruntled elements, because they were not successful in terms of securing the spoils of victory the way France and Britain they had secured for themselves. So, the Italians felt that the way their participation in the war was in the First World War, they were not being given the kind of wealth or areas or money or the spoils of war as had been secured by Britain and France. So, this created a situation of dissatisfaction among the Italian population, and we also find how the forces of nationalist and socialist, they also were trying to discredit the Prime Minister's Giolitti government for his inability to solve the mounting socio-economic problems of post-war Italy. So, they were also critical of the government of that time, and we find that how these factions, they were fighting against each other among a lot of kind of violence and rebellion. So, this kind of a situation existed in Italy, and some have even called it as Biennio Rosso or the Red Years in Italy during this time. And so, in this situation of Biennio Rosso, and thereafter we find that how Mussolini appeared on the political scene, where we find that he made some kind of claims to reconcile the seemingly conflicting forces of socialism and nationalism. So, he gave hope to the masses of those times, that how his political party would in a function in such a manner where some kind of a happy union of nationalism and socialism would take place. And we also see that how the post-war labor unrest which was there, and the kind of discontent which was there in Italy, they were also leading the country towards communism, and Mussolini's party Fascisti alone could save the society from the danger of communism. So, he in a way gave some kind of a hope or some kind of a justification to the Italian masses to turn towards him, and he also in a way provided a picture where this kind of an image was being given, that if he did not get the support of the different sections of the society, then the country might head towards communism. So, we find that because of this kind of a fear or danger, many factions in a way supported Mussolini, and we also see, as I told you earlier as well, the black shirts, they opened a violent campaign against the socialists and the communists, and they entered into some kind of the violent kind of activities. And we find that in 1921 the coalition government of Giolitti was defeated, and how the fascists, they entered the chamber of deputies with the 35 seats. We also see, apart from this kind of situation, we find that the aspirations of the Italians, they were also false in that sense, as you can see on the screen as well. And as I told you, that there was a lot of disappointment in the Italians, and they felt marginalized during this time, and how the peace settlement of 1919 also left them dissatisfied. And this kind of a disappointment and the frustrations which were there in the Italians at that point of time, they were being fully exploited by Mussolini, who in a way showed them a picture where the lost pride and the lost prestige of the Italians would be brought back by Mussolini through his various policies and his political party, where he talked about restoring the lost pride of the Italians. And similar thing was also being done by Hitler in Germany later, where we find that the German pride, which felt hurt after the First World War due to the Treaty of Versailles and the treatment which was meted out to Germany, and how Hitler also mobilized the masses, that how the German pride would be brought back when his Nazi party would be voted to power. And in this way he was able to unite the masses in his support, and his hold over the Italy was also increased. And we find that how the people had this kind of feeling that their ambitions, which could not be achieved earlier under democratic Italy, would be realized under the fascist party. And when you see that how fascism in Italy, then we find that Mussolini's government changed the laws to suit his interests of dominating the parliament, and he dissolved all the political parties except his own political party. And how the fascists, they started the terrorizing opponents, making most of them to flee Italy. And Giacomo Matteotti, who was the socialist leader, who was killed mysteriously. So, we find that when you talk about the fascism in Italy, we find that it saw the rise of a kind of a regime which was totalitarian in nature, and the state was to decide for the individual what the individual has to do. And from the political point of view also, we find he abolished the Chamber of Deputies in 1929, and the fascist Grand Council was established as an apex body to make laws with Duke's leader as its top, and with the most of the important portfolio with him, like foreign affairs, interior, colonies, war, air and marine. So, we find that how Mussolini became the most important leader, holding the important portfolios which were integral to maintain his hold over Italy. And any of the activities which were considered to be democratic in nature, whether in the framework of the workers, lockouts and the strikes, they were being declared illegal, and it was being suggested that they were being done to increase the agricultural and the industrial production. And we find that the all walks of Italians' life, they were being controlled by the state now. And when you talk about the territorial expansion, we realize that he, over a period of time, gradually transformed the weak foreign policy of the previous government, and tried to make Italy some sort of a bigger power or a world power. So, This idea of territorial expansion was also there in Mussolini's mind, and he wanted to in a way increase the borders of the Italian state, and he had this kind of idea that when industrial development will take place, then they will need raw materials, and how when they are able to increase their territory in other regions, they will be able to secure those raw materials. And this is how we see that how Italy adopted the policy of setting England against France, France against England against Germany, France and England against Germany, and England, France and Germany against the Soviet Union. So this kind of a policy was being followed by Italy, and how the major European powers, they were to be divided among themselves, and either through invasion, conquest, diplomacy, and we find he was trying to expand the Italian territories. And so that was the kind of policy from the internal point of view, from which was being devised by Mussolini, and how it was to be applied on the foreign powers. So in a way he followed an aggressive foreign policy, and which was ambitious in nature. And so we will talk further about the ideas and policies which were followed by Mussolini in our next lecture. Thank you very much.